of you for your opening statements. I see this as I did 22 years ago in this committee, that to not just to get our state of readiness where it should be, but also to tell the truth about how unready we are. I think you did a good job of that, General Wilson. And Admiral Moran, the thing that was probably came out and shocked most people from yesterday was your statement about what more than half the F-18s are not running. I mean, that people need to hear that, and they need to hear it from you guys who are at the top and who are in a position to say it with more credibility, certainly, than I could say it. So anyway, we know where we are right now. We know the problems we have. The only area that there's a Senator Kane and I are in very much agreement. In fact, we have a mutual friend that put us together several years ago, and we have a friendship. There's a little bit of difference in how we see what has happened during the last administration. The idea of finding ourselves where we have to do something about sequestration, we have to do something about the deterioration and the funding and the abilities and the capabilities of our military. But as we do that, we don't want to be in a position where for every dollar we do that, we have to do it for the non-defense. I mean, that philosophy tells me that the priority is not what I interpret the Constitution. And I told you all of this when you're in my offices. And so I think it's important that we recognize that we're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding here, and we have to tell the truth. You know, talk about we're pretty good forward, but we got nearly an empty bench behind them. That's a serious thing. So you've heard a lot of the talks recently. You've heard the figures, as some of you have referred to. The Army going to 540,000 ships, 355 Marines to 36 battalions, and 1,200 fighter aircraft over there for General Wilson. These are figures that it's going to be hard to actually come out for exact figures. But we talked to Mattis about these same figures, and they recognize they do represent an enhancement that has to be there. So I want to start off by asking each one of you how realistic you think these figures are, just not as if they're going to be exact, but are they in the ballpark of the threat that's facing us now? Start with you, General.
Thank you, Chairman Inhofe, and I'll start by...
I neglected to say, let's change this. If there's no objection, we'll use 7-minute rounds because we're going to have to do this in one round. Go ahead.
I'll ignore this 4-minute ticker on my
Just
my
ignore that.
screen here.
Back on 7.
But yes, Chairman Inhofe, the Secretary of Defense has directed a strategic review that we expect to result in a adjusted force sizing construct. But as Chief of Staff of the Army has highlighted in prior testimony, the estimate that 540,000 in the active force reflects is a subset of what would it take to get the military risk level to respond to the contingencies that we face and the operational plans of our combatant commands down to a moderate level.
So you talk about moderate risk.
A moderate risk level. That would require a 1.2 million total force. Mm-hmm. Now, if we get adjusted guidance, obviously we will do our internal due diligence to determine exactly what the right number is. But you asked, is it in the ballpark? It's in the ballpark.
All right, and I appreciate that. You know, when you talk about risk, I would hope you would always make sure people understand. You risk, it talks about readiness, which talks about lives. We're talking about lives now, so that's how serious that is. Admiral Moran.
Yes, sir, Chairman. The number you quoted was based on our force structure assessment, which was done over the past year. Mm-hmm. I would tell you that that's a good target to start ramping towards, but as you know, in shipbuilding, sure, it takes years to get to one ship. So we're going to have many years to assess where new technology takes us, new warfighting constructs. But as I said in my opening, we know we're too small for what we're being asked to do today. Mm-hmm. So we have to get on a ramp to not only arrest the decline, which I think we're on in PB-17, mm-hmm, unsequestered and with an appropriations bill. So it's a target that's worth shooting for, at least in the beginning ramp of the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay, that's understandable. Would you repeat your characterization of our capability of our F-18s?
Yes,
So
sir.
that this record has them?
The facts are that for our entire Hornet fleet, that's the Hornets and Super Hornet fleet, we have 62% on a given day. Yesterday was 62%. I doubt it's changed much since yesterday. But we're in about 62% that are not flyable, which
More than
means
half, yeah.
more than half. On a typical day, it's about 30%. If everything's going well, about 30% that's either in depot or on the flight line, it's not flyable. Okay. So we're double where we should be in non-flyable aircraft.
Thank you. General Walters?
Yes, sir. You use the figure 36 battalions for us. That's a reasonable target to shoot at if it's a total force number. But more importantly, I think, is if we grow end strength, I mentioned that we have done 18 months worth of analysis on what capabilities we need, and they're everywhere from ISR, IO, counter UAS, which is nascent but required, and I think late to need right now. Long range fires. So before we build another capacity, we need to fix the holes that are in our current organizations. That's a smaller number. 194,000 is about that. Before you start buying any additional capability, and that's a strategic choice that needs to be made, and the strategic review will look at that. But I think the 36 battalions comes from a two-thing strategy, doing two things simultaneously. I can tell you today we cannot do two things simultaneously. And one of the stressing ones for us is Korea, and we couldn't do that with at all if we still had commitments elsewhere in the world, Europe, Africa, or the Middle East.
You know, they don't use that anymore like they used to, and they had two worldwide conflicts almost simultaneously.
Yes, sir, and I think our enemies know that.
It's a recognition we're not there.
Yes, sir, and I think our enemies know that, too.
Yeah, I think they do, too. General Wilson.
Chairman, as I told you yesterday, we're at about 50% readiness today across the Air Force.
Yeah.
We were the smallest Air Force we were ever in 2016, where we bottomed out at 310,000. This last year, we finished the year at 317,000. We want to grow our force to 321 this next year, but we think the target we're shooting for is 350,000 airmen for the United States Air Force. That number fills 100% of our current manning documents. So that's a current mission, that's no new mission. And so as mentioned by General Allen, as a strategic defense review looks at where we need to be, that number can be adjusted even up. But we think 350,000 is the number for our airmen.
Good answers.
We think we need 60 fighter squadrons, in addition to modernizing our nuclear force and our space forces.
Okay. I want to get at one other area before we go around, and that is when you're going through a starvation period, you have two problems, and that one is it's at the expense of modernization and maintenance. First of all, do you agree with that? What I'd like to have is just from each one of you the area of modernization that needs to be enhanced now because you've had to let that go, starting with you, General Allen.
As we testified last year, Chairman Inhofe, we've had most of our modernization programs on life support for the last several years. We are currently, our modernization program is 50% of what it was in 2009. In 2009, it was $48.5 billion. It's $24.8 billion this year, and it's inadequate to modernize for the near term, let alone the long-range future force that we know we're going to require on a multi-domain battlefield. So we would prioritize against our near-peer competitors to ensure our current platforms are the best that we can possibly field, and then begin to work on the new equipment that we would need. The good news about modernizing current equipment is it's shovel-ready today if the resources are provided.
Yeah. Ebro?
Senator, as you know, modernization for us also comes in the form of maintenance. We modernize our ships while they're in maintenance on just upgrading radars, weapon systems, those sorts. But in terms of platform modernization, our top priority is the Columbia-class to replace the Ohio-class submarines. We're at the end of service life in Ohio if we don't start this year. So we appreciate the anomaly in the current CR environment for Columbia. Second would be a close call between building to the 12th nuclear aircraft carrier Ford class to get us to a total of 12. And then DDGs and SSNs, probably SSNs over DDGs if we had to prioritize them, simply because we're already very low on our SSN numbers that are going lower over time, and that's a key capability for us.
Okay, well, Generals Wilson and Walters, you answer it for the record, since we're out of time here. But keep one thing in mind, and that is when you're looking at the future, you don't know really what you have to. I always remember the last year I was on the House Armed Services Committee, we had a witness. This is 1994. They said that in 10 more years we will no longer need ground troops. So you don't know. Predicting in the future, it's very difficult to do. So if you want to meet the expectations of the American people, you have to be superior in all areas, which we're not. Senator Kane.